Today we're going to look at REST APIs. REST APIs are the glue between the front end and the back end. So in Bootcamp 1, you guys did some asynchronous programming with Node.js. What makes Node so special is it takes JavaScript and brings it to the back end. But there's an additional framework that we can use to really easily make Node and the server-side stuff even more powerful called Express. And Express allows us to really easily open up the server to receive communications on certain endpoints. And so what an endpoint is an extension. So if you have localhost 3000/hello, that is an endpoint. If you have /hello/5, that's an additional endpoint. So that's how server-side stuff works, APIs work, is you have a server and then you set up different endpoints that can be communicated with, either through like a GET request where you're just getting information or a POST request where you're giving information, things of that nature. And we're going to go through all of that. So you saw a little bit of that in this first bootcamp where you set up the /listings endpoint. Now you had to do a lot of manual work and some different stuff for routing. So for that example it worked fine, but if you're building a robust backend, you need a framework to make it more organized and to have more features and stuff like that. So real quick, what is an API? An API is an application program interface, and it's a set of defined functions that access data, perform operations, and decouple applications. So this could be as simple as like a library you have in Python or in Java. And then what is REST? REST is a software architecture for developing web services. So when we bring this together, you have a web service framework that is almost like a library. However, you communicate over the internet. So when you bring these together, like I said, you have endpoints and all these different functions that you've defined running on a web server that can be communicated over the internet. And it's a request response type model. So the beautiful thing about REST is it's transferring state. So essentially you're taking data and you're going to give it to the server, or the server is going to give it back, and vice versa. And so rather than just purely like serving HTML and CSS, which is what blank static web servers do, is you type in facebook.com or whatnot and it returns to you the HTML and CSS and that will load. But with an API, you're just serving raw data. So a mobile app could consume it, a computer could consume it, a desktop app, it really doesn't matter as long as it's using a protocol to communicate over the internet. So REST APIs are made in a lot of the popular programming languages. They're usually paired with a web framework. So in Java you'll use something called Spring Boot, in JavaScript you'll use Node and Express, and in Python you might use something called Flask. These APIs live on the back end, so they're probably running on a remote server. Generally, you're going to access an API using the HTTP protocol, and so what that is every time you go into your web browser and you type in Google, what you're doing is you're doing http://google.com. And what that is it's doing a GET request to that server. That server is then going to have a response for you. So with those URLs and those endpoints, like I mentioned before, you can do a variety of methods. So in Bootcamp 1 we tested for a GET method, but we'll also show what a POST, a PUT, and delete do. And essentially what they allow you to do is give data to the server to then be able to do something, whether it be persisting data in a database or performing some sort of operation, doesn't really matter. A great tool for working with APIs is Postman. Postman lets you develop apps in the back end really easily by having a user interface and an organizational tool for all your different endpoints. So right here we have an exercise if you'd like to go ahead and do it. It's going to walk you through just basically getting Express and Node.js running. Here we'll take a look at that. We have Express, we have the app, and you can see what we do is you take this application object that is initialized from Express, and then we say we want to get and handle all of the /hello endpoint requests. And so with JavaScript you have callback functions. So we're passing this callback function right here. And so essentially every time the server gets a GET request to /hello, it's going to give us the request, it's going to give us this response object which we can interact with, and also a next object. And so what we're going to do is just say response, and then response, like I said, is an object that has different parameters and also has methods. So we're going to response.send world. And then so after we're done setting up all our handlers for the app, then we can go ahead and start listening on port 3001. So let's go ahead and spin this up and see what happens. Okay, so localhost 3001. You see we have world. So to take this example a little bit further, I went ahead and created a planets.js. And so this is a server, but this time I've implemented the different methods that I talked about: post, get, put, and delete. And so as you can see, we take this app, and then we're going to just keep adding stuff to it before we actually start the server. So this first thing is a body parser, and what that allows is, if I, from the client side, if I send data to the server, it'll parse it into JSON so we can really easily interact with it. Additionally, what Express allows you to do is something called middleware. So you can see we have app.use, and that's going to basically be something that runs through as the request is received. So this first one is it's going to parse it. Then this next middleware is just going to log what the path was. And you can see we have this next call. This next call is very crucial because if we don't have it, then it won't move on to these other functions that we define. It'll just stop right here. And so we're just building all these handlers and this middleware as we go. So we're going to do a post request. So this essentially means that the client's going to hit this endpoint /planets, but they're also going to give us a body of data. And that body we're going to expect to have planet. And if we get that, then we'll go ahead and push it to this planets object. And so when you restart the server, this planets object is going to get reset, this array. But in Bootcamp 2, you're learning how to do data persistence. So essentially what you're going to be able to do is when the server is not on or whatnot, the data will be saved somewhere. But for right now, just to keep this a simple example, we just have this temporary array. Then we have a get. It's going to get all the planets. Then we have a put. So what a put does is an update. So we're going to say planet, and then we're going to provide an ID. And so Express allows you to do these IDs or parameters in the URL really easily just by doing this little colon here and then specifying a name. And then we access that right here. We get our planet update from the body, and then I created a little validate request function just to make sure that the ID is a number and the planet is a valid planet. And so that's what we're running through here. And it will return true if it is. From there we can then send that response. And the same thing with delete, we get the ID, we get the planet, validate that, and then we can go and delete that. And then finally we start that server. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So it's running, and then now we're going to open up Postman and we're going to take a look. So Postman, as I mentioned, is a great tool for developing APIs. And so you'll see you can make these different folders to organize all your endpoints right here, really nice. And we're going to go ahead and test it. So first let's just get all the planets. So you see we have specified the get method for this URL. If we hit get, there we go, we get Earth. Now let's go ahead and post. So essentially we're going to add. So let's go ahead and add. So like I said, we have now the post method to this endpoint /planets, and now in the body we're providing this planet attribute. So when we send that, we'll see that it added Mars to the array and it returned that new array. So now we can do Jupiter. I don't think I spelled that right, but it's okay. And then we can go ahead and now look at the put method. So the put method, we're going to provide an ID. So let's just test an ID that doesn't exist to check the validation. So as you can see, that validate function's found that planet does not exist. But let's go ahead and change number 2 to Pluto. Send that. As you can see, now we have Earth, Mars, Pluto. Finally, the delete function. Let's go ahead and delete that first one. And there we go. So this is a really quick intro into REST APIs.